Let me stop this noise here in the background that I've got. Okay. Hi there, Phil Simborg for the USBGF, and today I have a position that I missed, and I think I understood what I did wrong, but I'm not confident that I could explain it well enough, so I called on my favorite guru of cube analysis, John O'Hagan, who's one of the top players in the world, to tell us what's going on here. It's a money game. Blue is on roll and is thinking about whether or not to double. And, of course, if blue doubles, red has to decide whether he should take or not. And before we hear John's analysis and approach to how he would solve this problem, let me give you a couple of seconds to consider yourself what you would do. If you're blue, would you double? And if you were red, would you take or pass if doubled? And, by the way, if I'm not giving you enough time, you can always pause the tape and then continue. So give it a little thought. Okay, John, how would you approach this over the board?
All right, Phil, what I would do is, first of all, using the Woolsey Rule from blue's perspective, it's not at all clear that white has a take, so blue certainly should redouble and let red decide whether or not red wants to take or pass. So that part is easy since you're...
Okay, so you're not sure if red has a take because he's losing the race by 29 pips. He probably has very, very little chance to win a race, even though there's a lot of wastage for blue. His best chance to win is to get a shot and hit it.
Exactly, yeah.
Okay. So you're not sure it's a take. Okay.
So certainly blue should double, and then it's up to red to decide whether or not to take or pass. And in this position over the board, I would just assume there's no gammons for either side, even though that's not exactly right. It's real close. So therefore, you need 25% less some cube vig to take. Now, in most middle game and medium to long raced kind of positions, you can deduct about 1/7 of the 25% for cube vig, which brings your true take point down to around 21.5%, 22%, somewhere in that range. Because quite often in say a medium to long race, you will sort of gradually creep up your winning chances up to where you can offer an efficient redouble. Okay, that's usually the case. However, this position...
Before you continue, let me just clarify that a little bit for maybe some lower-level players that might be watching this. Your break-even point in a money game is 25%. You should take anytime you have more than 25%. And what John is saying is you can take with a little bit less than 25% if you have some power in holding the cube. That's what cube vig means. So if you're holding the cube, and because you're holding that cube and can recube, you can take for something less than what looks like a 25% position because you really can have more than 25% because of your power of holding the cube. If you get to a point, for example, when you're holding a cube, let's say in this position, let's say you only could win 24% of the time. If you're holding the cube and you're able to hit and recube, you have gained something because of the use of the cube. You've gained winning all those games that you might still have lost, even though it's not very many, after you hit. So that's that's the concept of the cube vig. And what John is saying is, in a normal racing position or in longer positions where there's a lot more rolls to go, that cube vig, or that amount of value that you have for holding the cube, is worth, in this case, around 3.5%, which is 1/7 of 25. And that means that your take point is around 21.5. Now, I've put in a bunch of positions, and so has John, and we've tested this, and the truth is that Extreme Gammon uses that same number. If I take a long race and I give a player a 21.5% chance to win, it's right on the borderline whether he should take or pass. But if he only has a 21% chance to win, it's usually going to come out to be a pass. And if he has a 22% chance to win, it's going to be a take. So Extreme Gammon, using nothing but rollouts, comes up with that same number, which confirms John's theory about the 1/7. Okay, let's go on from that.
Yes, and one last comment on that idea, and that is that when you own the cube on 2, and sometimes are able to redouble to 4, what that generally means is that a lot of your wins will come at the floor level, and few of your losses will. So that's like another reason why you can take with less than 25%. Now, how does that apply to this position? The answer is not very well. This is sort of the kind of position where the cube doesn't do you much good if you're red, if you own it. Because let's think about what might happen here. If blue clears in safely, or if blue leaves a shot and you fail to hit it, red hardly ever is going to win this race, right? I mean, he's a huge underdog. And on the other hand, if blue rolls a bad number, say like a 6-3, or any of the, I think it's 18 numbers that leave a shot, you cannot redouble because you will have about somewhere between 11 and 14 ways to hit. So you're an underdog, so you'd be crazy to redouble. And if you hit, then you can double them out, but you would almost certainly have won if there was no cube in play anyway. And if you miss, you're just a huge underdog to win the race. So
let me illustrate that very, very quickly. Let's assume that blue rolls, for example, a 6-1, and he leaves a shot, and you hit it. And let's say you roll, you're holding the cube, you're red, you're holding the cube, and now you hit blue, and now you're on roll, and you can re-cube. Let's see how much value that cube really gained you, how much more you win because you're holding the cube, about 3.8%. What that means is if he didn't have the ability to use the cube, he would still win this game 96.17% of the time anyway. So because you have the cube in this position, you're gaining very, very little. You're only saving. You're going to, of course, you would redouble, and of course your opponent would pass, or this says you might be too good to redouble. But if you did redouble, you get very, very little extra value as a result of having hit the checker. Whereas if it was in a pure racing game and you had racing chances, you might be able to redouble and get a drop when your opponent has as much as 20% winning chances. And now, because you've used the cube, you saved losing 20% of the time. That's where that bigger cube big comes from. Okay, let me go back to the original position.
Okay. Okay, and so therefore, because the cube is worth very little to red, red's cubeless winning chances have to be really close to 25% in order for red to take. So let's think about this. How often does blue leave a shot? And the answer is quite often. We've actually got 18 bad numbers: 6-3, 6-2, 6-1, 5-3, 5-2, 5-1, 4-3, 4-2, and 4-1. All of those leave a direct shot. Some of them you get 14 ways to hit, others you get 12, and still others you get 11. And it averages out to exactly, on average, you get 12 hits per shot that blue has to leave. So you hit 1/3 of the time. Now, everything else that blue can roll will clear his 8 points safely, except for 3-2 and 2-1. With 3-1, he'll go ahead and play 8-5 to 4, leaving you 4-number shot from the roof. So therefore,
and also the same with double one.
No, actually, double ones. He's just played.
Brings them in.
Yeah, brings them in 8-6 twice. Okay, so therefore, there are 18 numbers that leave a direct shot. On average, you will hit 6 of those. In 4 numbers, the same chance will repeat next time, unless you roll a 6, in which case you'll have to run. So therefore, on average, you're going to get about 20 shots out of 36 games, and you'll hit 1/3 of those, which is 6 2/3. Okay, so 6 2/3 is still quite a ways away from 9. You need close to 9 because of what we said earlier about the cube really not doing you much good here. So if blue rather comes in safely behind you, or if blue rather leaves a shot and you fail to hit, how often do you win that game? Well, ballpark, I'd say over the board, I'd estimate maybe 5%, maybe even less. So you hit about, a little less than 7 games out of 36, 6 2/3, I think is what I said earlier. And so of the other 29 games, if you win 5% of those, that's about 1.5, a little less than 1.5 games. So that brings your total wins up to a little over 8, about 8.2, I guess. Okay, and that's quite a ways away from 9. And about the only way you can ever get an efficient redouble here is when you win the race. And typically, when you win the race in this sort of a position, you still can never redouble because it might eventually come down to like a last roll position. You have four checkers left on your 1 point, and blue's got 2 checkers left on its 1 point, and you roll a double. Well, there's no way you can redouble that, prior to rolling because you're still a big underdog. So therefore, the cube isn't really worth much. So it still might be a take, but that's the idea. Is that the fact that the cube does you very little good, you have to be real close to the 25% winning chance mark in order to take it. And so here, you're probably not quite close enough, but I'm sure it's close.
Here's the answer. It is close. It's a pass by only a little bit.
Yeah.
Here's what really fooled my student that sent this to me. He said, well, I thought my take point was 21.5. And I'm well over 21.5. And every time, usually when I'm over 21.5 in a money game or unlimited game, I have a take. And the real difference here is exactly what John was saying. You have so little cube big that the take point has to be pretty close to 25. But actually, I think Extreme Gammon is telling us that the take point probably is about 23.6 or maybe 23.7. It's somewhere closer to 24%. There still is about 1% cube big in this position. If it's the very last roll of the game, we know your take point is 25% because it's impossible to redouble. Or if it's effectively a last roll position, and what we've learned by this position is from John is a lot of things. We've learned, number one, that we just can't blindly use a number for our take point. We do have to reduce that number if the game is shorter, or if it's a highly volatile game where about the only way you're going to win is with a shot. Then your take point is going to get a lot closer to the dead cube take point number.
Yeah.
And that tells us that you need to know your dead cube take point numbers as well as the range, and be able to come up with some kind of an estimate of cube big, because at different scores, these things become very, very different also. For example, at 3-away, I use a live cube take point of around 25%. Well, at 3-away, in this position, that 25% is really not a valid number because you don't have the cube big. So this is probably also a pass at 3-away. Let's see.
That's correct, yeah.
And it is a big pass. A big pass, although we would have had to have 25% anyway, so his take point probably is even higher. So even if Red had a better game here, let's say that Red had a better race, and I'm not sure how much better we have to make his race to give him 25%, but I suspect that we're getting close. Let me just try a couple more pips, and let's see what we have here. No, you're still not over 25%. Let's see if
you actually have to get close to 30% because at 3-away, the dead cube take point is 30, not 25.
Ah, that's right.
Yeah.
Okay, so you have to get.
So maybe you have to move. Well, what you might want to try to do is moving the 2 blue checkers from the 8 to the 9 point. That gives Red more hitting chances. Fewer clearing numbers for blue and more hitting. More numbers that force blue to leave a shot. That might do it.
This probably. Let's see. I have no idea. This is probably much closer to 30%, or maybe even more. Yeah,
I haven't done the math on how many blot numbers there are and things like that. But like I do notice right away that 6-4 leaves 2 blots. So there's definitely a lot more hits here. And one last comment too, back to our original position, is that in some kind of positions, in roughly these kind of positions, sometimes you can get an efficient redouble by, say, for example, if you had 2 checkers on the opponent's 5 point, and then you could, even if blue came in and brought the 2 men to the 6 point, you could wait there. You could run with 1 checker and wait a few extra rolls. Meantime, blue might roll 6-1 or 5-1 and leave a shot when he's got like 4 or 5 men off. Then you could offer an efficient redouble. But here you sort of need to hit right away or else win the race. And so there's no, you only have one checker back, so there's no real way to wait there, after the first hit or miss. That's basically it.
So this has got to be a pass as well. Even bigger pass. Yeah.
Bigger, yeah.
Even bigger pass.
So, yeah. But if you put them there on the 9 point and you take the one checker and put it, where'd you have it on? The spares were on the 6 and the 3 for red here, I think. So, that, I mean, now you get some extra hitting chances. This might be a take at three-way. I don't know. I'd have to think about it some more. But I imagine it's close. Yeah, you can check it if you want.
Yeah, my gut is that I would take this, but let's see. Yeah,
yep,
big take. Big
yeah,
take.
Yeah,
and again, you can see he's under the dead cube take point, so there is some cube big here. If there was no cube big whatsoever, then it would not be a take.
Right.
Let's see, the recube take point at three-way is 25%. So this would clearly be a take on a recube. I'm sorry, blue had the cube and was recubing. This would have to be a big take.
Oh, absolutely. Right.
Because even though there's no cube big, his take point now is 25%.
Right.
So,
exactly.
So there's several lessons involved here. You need to know your dead cube take point. You need to have some idea of how to calculate cube big and where it lies. I have memorized the live cube take points, or the average live cube take point, assuming a longer race for all scores at 7 away, and down, and that's not enough. That's the point. You need to know that those numbers have to be adjusted, but it's a good starting place because if you use the numbers that XG shows you, the live cube take point that XG shows you, for example, for money is really too low. It shows you 20%. If you look at cube information, it says 20%, and that is assuming that you can get a perfectly efficient recube at exactly the right moment when your opponent has to take or drop, and we know that moment almost never occurs. And in order to be efficient with your cube, you generally have to double a little bit early before he has a drop. Otherwise, you lose your market too much. So that's why we have come up with this 1/7 rule, or giving 3.5%, or using 21.5%. And a future version of Extreme Gammon is going to have a middle column with the average live cube take point, I think is what Xavier's going to call it. And the number that's going to be shown here is going to be almost exactly 21.5. And again, in this position, it wouldn't be valid to use that. It wouldn't be valid to use 21.5 because you don't have a normal amount of cube vig. I thought it was also very interesting to hear how John came up with this thinking that in the original position, red did not have his 25%. He came up with a little bit more than 8 rolls out of 36. John does all of his calculations and wins and losses in these kinds of positions, assuming 36 possible rolls and coming up with a number there. It's much easier to do it by numbers out of 36 that you win and then get a percentage, as opposed to using percentages. If he does this, what percentage of the time does he leave a hit, and what percentage of the time does he hit it? You're multiplying percentages times percentages, which is much more complicated, and it's going to take you longer, and you're more likely to make a mistake. So John is able to do this very quickly over the board as a matter of practice and habit. Very, very good lesson. Anything else to add about this position, John?
Not that I can think of, no.
All right, great. Thank you so much for your help in these positions, and we'll be seeing John again in more positions in the future. He's my go-to person for all cube matters. I think he's as good as anybody in the world. Thanks for your help and support for the USBGF. Bye-bye.
Sure.